But before we do that, I want to turn next to epistemological issues and raise the question of knowledge for idealists. As human beings, we want to know the world, and we want to know the reality, and certainly want to come to know the important truths about reality. And so then there's a question how, if we say the lower realm, the natural world, is of less importance and less significance, less interest to us, we really want to focus our attention on and come to know the higher reality. The source of all of the important truths, the eternal truths, are in the higher reality. How do we come to do so? Well, here the story requires a little bit of a distinction between different kinds of idealists. There are some idealists, for example, who are very strongly religious in their orientation, and are traditionally religious in their orientation, and they will then, in talking about the supernatural, speak of it in terms of a personalized being. Right, and so we can then say our question epistemologically is how can we as human beings come to know God, right, or come to be reunited with God? And the standard answer here is that God, being a purely spiritual being, is not going to be something that we can understand through the senses. The senses are physical organs. All they can do is come to know the natural world. We're not going to come to know God through studying nature, because God is wholly other, completely different than. And so what we're then going to need is to have something that we do with our soul, spirits, right, or minds that come to know God. Now, most religions have, at best, put reason a co-equal as a capacity here. Most religions will give pride of place to saying that God is not something that we can primarily reason about. Rather, we need to have a soul connection, right, or a spiritual connection. Perhaps a revelatory connection is a possibility here. So I will start a subcategory here. If we are religious in our idealism, one possible answer is to say that what we need to do is to train our souls or our spirits to have various sorts of mystical capacities. And it's when one is having a mystical experience that one is having a direct connection cognitively between your soul and the great soul that is God. If one is not one of the people who either by nature is capable of having mystical experiences, some religions will argue that way, or if one has not sufficiently trained oneself, then one will have to rely on those who have had mystical experiences. And so we will have an emphasis on faith as the proper epistemology. For those of us who are more naturalistic in our orientation, coming to know that the higher world is going to be simply a matter of faith. And in some religious traditions, typically later religious traditions, partly due to the influence of philosophy, there will be a secondary role that will be assigned to reason. Reason might take one a certain way along the path toward coming to know God, and then the final step will be a mystical step or a faith-oriented step. Or it might be the case that after one has accepted a certain religious tradition, perhaps on faith, the job of reason secondarily is to come along and provide supporting rationality, supporting reasons for one's faith in this particular case. Non-religious idealists will, when they're conceiving of the supernatural world, conceive of it in impersonal terms. They'll say there is a higher eternal world of absolutes, but it's not a being that has thoughts or goals or feelings or particularly cares. Instead, it's a set of higher realities that set the standard for and perhaps generate the lower world of nature and inform it to some extent. Instead of then thinking of the world in terms of God or the gods, right, or various sorts of spirits who have personalities, here we will speak in terms of the higher world being, or in some world, the kind of world of forms, right, or the world of ideas, right, and so on. Or we might say ultimate reality, right, using capital U and capital R in those particular cases. Now, the epistemological story, that is to say, the question of how we come to know this higher world, tends to be different for those idealists who are more impersonal in their conception of the supernatural realm. Typically, what you find in impersonal idealists is a de-emphasis on faith, a de-emphasis on of just following tradition, and a de-emphasis on revelatory techniques, excuse me. Because if God does, or if the higher realm is not a God, then God is not particularly interested in communicating with you, so he's not going to single you or anybody out for revelations as the God of the Old Testament did. Instead, it's more likely to be the case that it will be us as human beings who will have to exert certain sorts of efforts if we're going to come to understand and perhaps tap into the higher realm. Now, what the epistemology then that it was going to be emphasized by the impersonal advocates of idealism is what I will call a pure reason, right, approach. Right? And that will be a reason, that is to say, we will in principle be able to reason our way from our starting place in the natural world up to the supernatural world. And here the argument is going to be that in addition to our human nature, including sensory apparatus that put us in contact with the natural world, we also have reason, right? Or we have a mind, and the primary purpose of our mind is not to come to know the natural physical world, but rather it has a different destiny, a higher destiny. Our job as human beings, using our exalted rational capacity, is to use it to come to understand and comprehend the higher, purer physical world, or sorry, supernatural, the non-physical world.